Okay, so this is part two. So basically, I ended up moving out that year. I got a job. I got a job working where my mother worked. I'm not going to disclose where she worked because, I'm not really trying to put her at fault or anything like that. But I ended up getting a job where my mother worked. And, it was a decent job. Like, I didn't feel like I was doing really bad at the job or whatever the case may be. But, this job was enough for me to pay my bills at the time. Like, I was making like, what, 13, 50, $14, which back then I feel like that was decent. I was able to pay my bills and still have like money left over. So I ended up moving out. This was like 2016 or 2017. And I know y'all like, what does this story have to do with it? But I experienced the exact same thing when I moved out again. Like I ended up having to come back home because I went through a slew of crazy ass situations. So okay, I moved out February of 2019. Everything was cool, copacetic. Like, I ended up doing everything. I lived with my roommate because at that time, like, and we stayed in a pretty decent ass apartment. At that time, during that time, like, I I was able to handle things. Like, I got the job, but there was a 30-day probationary period. Not a 30-day, a 90-day. Like, I guess knowing me, I didn't think that I was going to lose the job, but I ended up losing my job. On the 89th day, they fired me. They just randomly told me that I wasn't a good fit. I did the test at the job and everything to stay there, and they ended up telling me that I wasn't a good fit for the job. So I ended up losing my job after like already getting into the apartment 3 weeks. I mean, 3 months. So for a little bit of time, I ended up having to look for another job. And I got fired on that job. If I started that job in January, by March, I didn't have the job anymore. I didn't end up getting another job until like May. And I ended up getting a job at the airport. I had to go away for like 6 weeks to do training. So my training was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I was working at the airport. I was actually working outside on the ramp. Like, and it was a very rough job. Like, I ended up getting another airport job after that, but that job was very rough. I worked for United Ground Express. This is in Birmingham, Alabama. I worked that job from I want to say I worked that job I worked that job from January. I worked that job from like May until like December. And or like June through December. I didn't go through a real long period of not having a job, but when I did have the job was very strenuous. During this time too, my roommate didn't have a car, so we would like share my car. I would take her to work. So I ended up being with this, like, ended up dealing with this person, and I would take them to work and stuff like that. Like, but there would be days where I would be a little late getting to work because sometimes traffic would get the best of me. And the way that this particular airport job worked is that if you showed up too late too many times during your probationary period, it would automatically time you out. So I ended up losing my job at this apartment too. I ended up asking my grandmother to just help me because during this time frame, my friend ended up moving her criminal ass ex in to live with us. And it was just a lot of shit going on. Like, this person, they got rid of her dog, not her dog, they got rid of her cat, let the cat out the window. Like, he was a very fucked up ass individual. He was a Gemini. He was also a gay man undercover, and we found this out while we was dealing with him. No, that's not really relevant, but it's a lot of weird shit that happened. And this person was also a military brat or shit like that. So, things just end up happening in that situation. So he ended up stealing my TV. This is like around, like, I ended up finding another job. I got another job at Envoy Air. This is like a subsidiary of American Airlines. So I ended up getting this job in December, but the job didn't start till like January. So I ended up moving back. I ended up moving to live with my mom after this. And I basically kind of got my folks to help me pay out my part of the month rent. And I left my friend there to live there with him until it was time to go. I made sure to make sure that everything was copacetic. I made sure, like, the bills that was in my name, I made sure to go ahead and pay them out and make sure that I told them, like, after this day, it's going to be a shut off day. I did go through a period where they tried to act like I didn't shut out my part of the bill, but I ended up getting it straight. So come January, as like, I ended up moving back to my mom's house, and I noticed that as long as I was living with one of my parents or someone, my life was pretty cool and copacetic. Like, I ended up staying at this job from 2000. Well, I stayed at this job from 2017 until, like, I didn't work this job long. Like, I want to say I ended up working this job from the beginning of January 2017 until, like, I don't know, to like the summer of that year. Like, I end up going through a period where, like, I decided to go back to school or do a boot camp class. And, I ended up quitting that job. Like, I ended up quitting that job. I want to say this is 2017. I ended up going to do a boot camp class for UAB for front end web development. And I end up passing the class, but I end up having to quit my job because the way the airport would work, I work evenings. So it's like sometimes we would have layovers, and it's like I would not have any time to get like my schoolwork done. And if you know anything about anything dealing with coding and anything remotely like versed in engineering, you know that you have to dedicate a lot of time to that. So I end up quitting that job around October. And I finished the class, and I was one of the only few people out of my class to get a job. And I ended up getting a job at UAB in the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And, they ended up passing a law to where they got rid of those jobs, but I ended up quitting that job before that happened anyway. But I ended up getting a job at UAB in the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as a web design intern. I'm gonna be honest, when I had this job, my job description really wasn't anything what I was doing. I really was a graphic designer for the company, because the way how UAB was set up, the way they do websites, the websites have to go through the teams. Like, they already had a certain way you had to design the websites. Like, they used a certain program, so we could never really edit things. The only thing that I could change is like banners and words. Like, I was just someone that was keeping everything like together, but I couldn't really actually code within their system, because the way it was set up, you had to work in their department, like the coding department, to be able to really change the websites. Like, they had to get things approved. So really, my job title was web design intern, but that's not what I did. I worked at this job from 2017 until 2019. 2020. I ended up quitting this job a little bit right before COVID happened. I ended up going to go work with my dad. And the main reason I quit this job was because it wasn't really paying anything. Like, I was making like $15 an hour, but I was part-time and I only worked 4 hours a day. So it's like, I really wasn't really being offered any real money, and it was no growth unless I got my associate's degree. So it's like one of those things where you notice, like, people will offer you different like programs and whatever, but they don't really give you anything. Like, you still have to have degrees and stuff like that, even if the school is the one that created the program. So fast forward, I end up quitting this job. I end up going to work with my father. It was like March 2020. I had an argument with my mom. She ended up putting me out. I ended up living with my father for like a week. I worked with my dad for like a week. And I also had a really bad car. My dad basically told me he was going to help me, like, kind of like get myself together, get me back situated. But my dad wanted me to like really pay bills. I didn't have no money for real then. So it's like he basically tricked me into like coming to live with him. And he knew that I had issues with my car. He told me that he would let me drive one of his cars or even take me to work. And he didn't do that. And we ended up falling out. And I ended up basically going to go live with my grandmother for a little bit before moving back, before me and my mama squashed the beef and I moved back to my mom's house.